February 20th, and going to be talking a little bit more about the budget, the fiscal year 26 budget, and going to hear from the Attorney General first, and I'll just set that up. But if welcome you to the table, and I'll just Attorney General Clark, I appreciate you being here. So, just as a precursor, we've been hearing, as we've been looking at public safety issues in here, a concept that I've heard, I think, from the administration fix the issues, fix the system, as opposed to funding the system. I think that we need to do both, frankly. But we heard from the state's attorneys the other day, and it seemed like part of their concept for fixing the system is getting the Attorney General more involved, and perhaps other attorneys throughout the state government doing more work, I guess, and certainly wanted to get your comment about that. Want to understand also, we haven't had a full really introduction to how the Attorney General's office works in the realm of dealing with criminal cases, and would love to hear that as well. So I'll turn with that introduction, turn it over to you. Thanks again for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I think I'll start with just describing a little bit the system that we have in Vermont and the role that the Attorney General plays. It is pretty unique. Maybe there's one other state that does it this way, but it works for us. We have 14 independent county prosecutors who are elected in their counties and serve 4-year terms. In addition, we have a statewide Attorney General who has concurrent jurisdiction, but for the whole state, not just a county. We also, in statute, when you look at, if you're ever elected Attorney General and you want to know what your job is, you can read about it in statute. So that's what I did. I read what's my job. And there are statutes that instruct what the role of the Attorney General is vis-a-vis criminal work. And over time, the culture in our state, which is very Vermont, is that we work very collaboratively. And we are in communication with many of the state's attorneys regularly. We have, of course, state's attorneys' offices that are extremely small. I think it's critical that we have really good relationships with state's attorneys, but especially in those really small offices, so that they know we're always here. Phone a friend, we're here, we can help. Just to be another lawyer. Some don't have more than one lawyer or 1.5 lawyers. So turning specifically to our criminal division, I have with me today Domenica Padulia, who is the criminal chief of that division. I think of the division as having 3 parts. First is Medicaid fraud. Medicaid fraud is funded 75% by the federal government. We have very strict rules about Medicaid fraud, and they literally have to be in a separate space. They have their own separate office with that grant. And one of the restrictions is that they can only do Medicaid fraud. So we'll set them aside for this conversation because I don't think this is really what you're getting at. The other 2 parts are the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, which is a law enforcement agency that is housed in our office. It consists of several investigators and 2 canines. Thank you. You have fairly recently provided us with an additional investigator, which we greatly appreciate. The work that they do, Internet Crimes Against Children, you could probably figure it out, but they are working on child sexual abuse material cases and child sexual abuse cases. A huge percentage of the work that the whole criminal division does is related to that work. The third area is the criminal unit. The criminal unit consists of currently four, but there's 6 positions for lawyers. And then they share with Medicaid fraud a paralegal. So it's pretty small. What we have done in our office, which is at the the prerogative of the Attorney General, is to focus on the most violent crimes. That would be homicide, sexual assault, child sexual abuse material. This is the area that we have focused on, and almost all of our cases are felonies. That's really the work that we have focused on when it comes to prosecution. In addition, as you know, we also serve on a number of boards and commissions and perform work related to that you would expect for the statewide elected prosecutor. And Domenica does a lot of that work herself. But yeah, we're here providing advice to you and et cetera, and doing that work as well. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts. I know that the state's attorneys testified that they're feeling under-resourced and need more resources. I fully support that. I think I'm the only person here who's ever run statewide, and I can tell you when you go around the state of Vermont and you talk to Vermonters, you will hear consistently that public safety is a priority. So I fully support their efforts to, amplify the work that they do, get more resources so that they can make sure that they can do the best job they can for Vermonters. In terms of whether we are over-resourced, I would not say that that's true at all. We do the best that we can with what we have, and I can't say that we have the capacity to do a whole lot more, although if we did a whole lot more, the statute is instructive on what the Attorney General should be doing. There is one charge in particular that is explicitly named in the statute of it is, the Attorney General shall represent the state. It is homicide. In that vein, we always, when there's a homicide, we always offer our services or to take the case to all the state's attorneys. If they decline, we respect that. If they don't, we'll team up with them. We currently have several homicides we're helping with or handling in a number of states. So that's kind of the approach that we have taken. I think setting aside the fact that the state's attorneys are feeling very overwhelmed, which is understandable, and need more resources, I think the system is working pretty well. So anyway, that's an overview, and I tried to address the concerns. So I hope that's helpful. I can answer any questions or go into more detail about anything if you need.
Appreciate that. Tom.
Jump right into it. So how many assistant attorney generals are there in total? You told me how many are in the criminal division, how that's broke down, but how are they allocated and what are their caseloads like?
We have about 100 assistant attorneys general. Some of them are senior. I'm including myself in that. So maybe it's 99 positions. How are they allocated, like among the office?
Yeah. Department wise, the numbers.
Let's see. We probably have, well, I would say most of our lawyers are serving state government. So they're either in the Human Services Division, serving human services agencies, or they're in what we call the General Counsel and Administrative Law Division. So those are serving the tax department, Agency of Transportation, education, stuff like that. That's probably most of the lawyers that we have. We also have the consumer unit, the civil rights unit, and the environmental unit. They are in the consumer assistance program, and they are in the public protection and environmental and public protection division. I would say roughly we probably have 5 or 6 in consumer, maybe 5 in environmental, 2 in civil rights, 1 lawyer at the consumer assistance program. And then we have the appellate unit has 2 lawyers, the civil unit, which defends the state when the state is sued. I think we have 5 or 6 lawyers there. So yeah, pretty typical. Probably this criminal unit is similar to other sizes. In MFRAU, we have 2 lawyers. Medicaid fraud is MFRAU. I'm having an uneasy feeling that I forgot someone. And I'm looking at Domenica. Okay, did I cover it? Did I get everybody? I think because I combined GCal and AHS, I have this uneasy feeling that I forgot someone, but I think I covered it. Yeah.
So as far as their responsibilities, I assume folks that are in AHS are providing legal advice, but how much work is done as far as defending state government as opposed to bringing cases?
Well, oh gosh. Let's see. So civil is really the focus of that, but there's, I'm trying to think if there's other areas as well, but generally civil, that's all they do. That's their job. They're civil defense attorneys, civil as opposed to criminal. And so they're defending when the state is sued, they are handling the lawsuits. Sometimes they get help. So some examples that would be more familiar to when we are sued because someone thinks or is alleging that a law that was passed is unconstitutional, we get appellate involved. And the reason why is because the 2 appellate lawyers are experts in constitutional law. And so we'll get them involved in some of those cases. They might not be the one handling the case, but they might help out with, motions or if there's arguments. And for that reason, they're the ones who've also handled all of our work with the work that we're having to do as a result of the new president and the executive orders that were put in place that were unconstitutional. So there are constitutional scholars.
Oh, thank you. Ken.
Good morning.
Morning.
So just to let you know where I come from, I'm getting hammered with public safety,
Mhm.
and it's one of my top priorities. And just to let you know on that, so I really appreciate you being here. And I have a couple quick questions. Not really, I have more than that, but I just thought I'd lead off with that. Can you help me out with this? How many murders and attempted murders has your office filed in the last 2 years?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I probably need to look it up. We'd have to spitball, looking at Domenica.
In the last 2 years that we found or we helped or assisted, I can say right now we are. There's
Ju-
11. That
Just
was
your office? Yeah, the Attorney General's office.
as our, on our own, is that what you're saying? Just like
Yeah.
we're responsible as the lead.
If you identify yourself for the record as well.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. No, that's fine.
Dominican Middle Chief of the Criminal Division.
Why don't we get that for you? Because I don't want you to be spitballing if you're not
Yeah, we
really
can get that
sure.
information.
Yeah, we'll get that for you.
Okay, and then regarding like home improvement cases, land improvement, fraud, timber trespass that we went through last year that I'm pretty sure you were involved in. I think it was roughly 100 or less. Is it true that the state's attorney recently requested that your office handle these cases and you guys declined?
We handle the most violent crimes. So if a misdemeanor case like home improvement fraud, that is not a case that we would handle. That is a case that a state's attorney would handle. And I don't think that the public wants their statewide elected prosecutor to handle those lower level crimes for a number of reasons. One of which is the lower level crimes are better for a local area, for that region. We have statewide jurisdiction, and when we do a case, we're located in Montpelier, we're going there. We might not be as familiar with all the players in the same way that the local state's attorney who's there every day doing the work is. But more importantly, we prioritize the most violent crimes, and those aren't violent at all. That's a crime of property. I should take a moment, though, to just promote for a minute. You and all of your great wisdom have.
I have no wisdom.
Okay. The legislature 2 years ago put in place a home improvement specialist in our office to be in the consumer assistance program. And that person is doing incredible work. They have recovered like $800,000 for Vermonters in a year and a half. It's been amazing. And they're doing that with our traditional mediation, which is to kind of like go between the parties and say what happened here. The person who's in that role was a contractor and was also a paralegal at one point. So he's really skilled at that. And that's been awesome. That was a really proactive approach to saying, like, how can we kind of, help folks resolve this? So that's been really great because home improvement fraud at the consumer assistance program, is something that we see pretty regularly. And now it's great because we have someone who can focus on all of that work.
Okay, so is that like you have a consumer protection division that maintains a home improvement fraud registry? Wouldn't it be logical for you to handle more of these consumer protection related crimes?
Well, a criminal lawyer and a civil lawyer tend to be, it's a pretty different skill set. I mean, the lawyers in the room probably, it's unusual to have, we have had people who do both, but usually it's I used to do this kind of law and now I want to do this kind of law. So it's not really transferable. The other thing is the consumer unit is doing really important work. And since we're talking about the budget, I should note their work brings in millions of dollars for the state. So that's also something to consider if they're not doing that work and they're doing something different. We wouldn't even keep them if someone was doing, that's not a civil lawyer, that's a criminal lawyer. So it would be a totally different position.
So I have one more question after. I'm just curious about this. How many lawyers do you actually have working under you?
100. Sorry, I was just asked that question.
Yeah.
So, well, like I already explained, I'm not that. Per capita, do you have any idea where we are related in the rest of the states? Are we above the national capital rate? You know,
Per
per
capita?
person,
Per person in what?
for the amount of lawyers that we have in our
We
state?
have the second smallest attorney general office in the whole country. Only Wyoming has this beat. So when I go to places and they have like, even DC has the same number of people in their district, but they have 600 lawyers and we have 100. So we do a lot with a little here in Vermont. It is true.
So about 100.
Yeah.
And then my final question, maybe I won't bug you anymore, but what's the total number of pending criminal cases filed by your office? And what are the different charge cases types associated with these cases?
We can get you the full number, but I'll tell you, we have every single case we're handling, except for one is a felony. The one that we're handling, it's a misdemeanor, is because a state's attorney needed to be charged with DUI, and only the attorney general can prosecute a state's attorney in their own county. And so we have one misdemeanor, and it's that one. And then the rest, I think, are felonies.
Well, that one didn't make headlines, did it? Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Karen and then Tom.
Thanks for being here. So and I appreciate, hearing kind of full picture of all the things, because we heard a lot of information last week or whenever it was. And so what I'm hearing from you today is that there is a path for collaboration and capacity sharing between the two.
Well, I would say a path. We're on that path because we always offer to help with a homicide or to handle a homicide, and we respect if the state's attorney declines. So they're taking on that work themselves, and we've offered to help, which I totally respect because they are independently elected. And my philosophy is the voters decided this is the person, and I want to be respectful of that person who is responsible for public safety in their county.
Great. I think one of the things we've heard was that maybe there was a disconnect or something on that. So I appreciate hearing like that is open and offered each time there is a homicide. I'm wondering if you can, like, what is the process? Is it just you find out there's a homicide and your office contacts that state and there's a conversation? Is it a piece of paper? What is
It's
the
usually a
process?
phone call. That's generally what
Okay.
happens. Domenica will get in touch with sometimes we're hearing from law enforcement themselves, but usually a conversation, which, I mean, how wonderful that we live in a place where that's the process. I mean, that is the collaboration. It begins right there. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's just helpful because like, is there miscommunication along the way? Because we're hearing like that there's capacity needs. So if you're
Yeah.
offering, then there's an opportunity to take on
Yeah,
that.
but the other thing to keep in mind is because if I were a county prosecutor, if I were a state's attorney, I would want to do the homicide myself because that is your community and your community is saying this happened. They're devastated. I would want to be doing that myself too. I mean, it's great to get help from the AG's office. So you're kind of like creating the bandwidth. And that's a great thing to do too. And many of the state's attorneys choose to go that route. If they're so overwhelmed, it's like they can't do it. But I completely respect wanting to be able to do that themselves. I get it. But we're always there to help. And we certainly will offer to take them too, so that we can make sure that we're providing the full public safety to Vermonters that they deserve. But it's you can't deny that public safety, not only in everyone's minds, but in reality has the needs, unfortunately, are just greater than they used to be. So
there's tension with making that decision sometimes.
yeah, and it's hard to say, like, we can't necessarily, especially the prosecutors, we just prosecute the cases. We're not in the position to, I should say, we're not totally in the position to influence what's driving this. I mean, we do the best we can and we're a part of the puzzle, but we're not completely the ones I don't oversee the Commissioner of Public Safety. I don't oversee, the funding dollars that come from the federal government and help with, the AHS programming that can prevent crime. One of the reasons why we love the Community Justice Unit and all the restorative programs that we do so much is they're so effective at trying to kind of deter people, not deter, get them on what's the word? Reroute. We're giving them the alternative route by addressing some of those, issues that they're having, whether it be addiction or whatever, and they're really, really impactful. And that, by the way, is where 20% of misdemeanors go. 20% are handled by the community justice unit in our office.
Tom and Angel.
Thank you. Clearly, we're trying to look for some efficiencies here.
Yeah.
All of us in our communities are getting, hammered with issues and crimes and backlog, and our state's attorneys are obviously overwhelmed. I think it's fair to say that they're handling 99% probably of the criminal cases and 98% of the homicides. I don't know. That's
I don't know about that.
I mean, statewide.
Statewide,
And
it could be. I mean,
Yeah.
there's 14 of them and one of me.
yeah, and they're doing a large part of the criminal investigations. And I think we're just trying to figure out.
Well, I just want to interrupt you. The investigations are done by law enforcement.
Right,
So
yeah.
so it's the local law enforcement or the state police or what have you. Yeah.
They have people that have to go back and.
Yeah, they're going back and
do
forth and-
things,
yeah.
And we appreciate, all the other programs that are taking things out of the criminal justice system and handling it too. But, with this giant backlog, I think we're trying to figure out, is there a way that we can change some resources or at least look at temporarily doing something to assist the state's attorneys and the judiciary climbing up out of this giant hole we have.
I appreciate that. And I think if you're just looking for a place, that person who has capacity, it's unfortunately not our office.
Angel.
So I think, like Representative Dolan, I'm trying to understand the process. So I'm hearing you say that that your office will sounds like proactively reach out.
We always do.
State's
Yeah.
attorneys to say like,
Can we
hey,
help?
do
Yeah.
you need a hand with this?
Yes.
And then it's the state's attorney's decision to accept or.
No, it's not.
Oh,
But we always defer. So we always, if they want to handle the homicide, that's yeah, but by statute, the Attorney General it's her prerogative. But we don't.
wait, so, okay, I think we're saying the same thing.
Okay.
The state's attorney can say, no, thank you.
Oh, I thought you meant to handle the case or not. Yes,
Okay, so once help is offered, the state's
Yeah.
attorney can decline.
that's right.
So how does it work though, if a state's attorney is reaching out to your office and your office declines to help?
With a homicide?
Or with any of I guess with, I'll say any case that they feel they need help with.
It's our prerogative.
Okay. How do you determine what?
Well, generally speaking, we try to handle, like I've said multiple times, we handle the most violent crimes.
Mhm.
So if someone is asking for help and the crime is not a violent crime, it's very unlikely that we would,
Right.
get involved. We also understand that every county is different, every county, and unfortunately, recently we've had counties that have particular challenges. And so we have tried to be extra helpful in those counties. Our priority is public safety. So we always have an eye on that. We're going to be helpful where we're needed in whatever county we're needed in. So we've tried to provide that support however we can in handling cases for a county that's struggling for one reason or another. You have to keep in mind, the counties are all so different. Some of them are very, very small and some of them are larger than our office of the criminal unit anyway. So it really varies and we try to, and that's also why having the personal relationships is so important because we want to make sure that we have the relationship. So the help is needed. There's no hesitation and we can, come in and be helpful.
So if a non-violent crime, but still a serious crime, I'm aware of one case in Chittenden County that is a stalking case where there is a conflict of interest, but no one in the Department of State's Attorneys can prosecute this case. So what happens then if your office?
So there's a
declines?
case that every single county has a conflict of interest with.
Yes.
Interesting. I can't even speculate. That's very surprising to hear.
So,
And our office wouldn't have a conflict, but all the state's attorneys would have a conflict?
that's my understanding. And so so I'm just wondering if not the state's attorney and not the AG, then who could prosecute that case? Is there anyone else?
It's such a far-fetched, that it's hard for me I don't think I've ever been presented with that kind of a hypothetical before. So I'd have to look into it. I guess conflict counsel. I mean, but that seems amazing that every one of us would be conflicted, but I guess that's possible.
Okay, so that, but would that be enough, I guess, to like, so but even in that
Let me
case,
give you, to interrupt, let me give you an example. We've had to prosecute, we've had to get involved with a misdemeanor because no one else could.
Right.
So that's what you're asking. If no one else
Yeah.
can do it, would you do it? Of course. We're doing that right now in
Right.
one county.
gotcha.
So are you able, I mean, if there truly was some sort of conflict, are you in a position to deputize somebody for a conflict, or would that be a state's attorney would be able to deputize?
When we have a case and there's a conflict of interest, we find conflict counsel and there's a procedure, and that happens from time to time.
Okay, so you don't go to the state's attorneys necessarily in that situation. You could, I mean, you could possibly, but you can go to a conflict attorney and.
Well, if it was a criminal case, we would just ask, we would say, can the state's attorney handle it? Someone in the state's attorney's office somewhere handle it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Attorney General, for coming today. I really appreciate, I know there are heavy demands on your time, and I appreciate you coming before all of us and, addressing past testimony, but also laying out the important work that you and your office are doing on a daily basis. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
One of the things that I think would be really helpful for all of us, just as we're coming up the curve and understanding what your office is working on, what you're prioritizing, and how you helpfully broke it out into Medicaid fraud, ICAC, and then criminal. Can you just further dive in a little bit into criminal and really outline, I guess, the responsibilities of your office as it revolves around criminal cases in the state?
Okay, so we prosecute cases and we have prioritized the most violent crimes. So it's homicide, we have some attempted homicide, sexual assault, and then child sexual abuse material, child sexual abuse. Because we house the ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, a huge percentage of our work relates to child sexual abuse. Sure. And you'll see our candidates come visit and ask for, we were asking for changes to the law, whether it be that or just more funding. We did get like I said, we got an investigator position a little bit ago, and it was much appreciated because what happens with that in that instance when we were advocating is our backlog was so deep. So the way that works is we get a cyber tip and we will investigate the cyber tip. But if there's a backlog, it means it might take 2 months for us to get to the cyber tip. And when you wait 2 months and a child is getting abused for 2 months because you didn't get to that. So we are very, very grateful to have that additional investigator. And so that's, I'm wondering, around ICAC, but so that is probably, I would say maybe half, it's a huge percent of the work we do relates to child sexual abuse and child sexual abuse material.
And I guess to just put like a finer point on it, are there any requirements derived out of statute that dictate the way you're supposed to handle criminal cases?
Yeah, what I referenced, the section that relates to the Attorney General, it says the Attorney General shall have I'm paraphrasing, I should probably find the statute, but it's like the Attorney General shall have shall represent the state in homicides, and then in other criminal and civil cases, if she determines, or if the situation, I can't remember the language, but it's something of that nature.
Sure.
Only homicide is named explicitly though in the statute.
Got it. And so I guess that and this might be a question for Dominica, but I guess since you're the witness, I guess in how many cases has the chief of the criminal division served as the lead attorney?
The chief herself?
Yeah.
She's more of a manager.
Okay.
And she represents our office on the various boards and things like
Sure.
that we do. But we would call them line attorneys. So the people who help me run the office, there's 150 people in the office. I have 5 chiefs, and the criminal chief is one of those chiefs. So they're the ones helping run the office. So she has other tasks in addition to, the management
Sure.
representing me. She's here today, obviously, and comes in. You'll see her from time to time, but she doesn't usually handle cases directly.
Well, and to your point earlier, right, you're doing a lot with a little, and I think that's something that is well taken. And this is not something that came, I do not want to make this a tit for tat and going back and forth referencing other testimony, but this is actually a point that didn't come up in prior testimony, but something I'm just curious about with you is how many times has the Attorney General's office gone to trial in the past year?
I will say trial is extremely unusual. Are you a lawyer?
No.
Okay. Trial is extremely unusual. It used to be common and now it's very rare. So I would say our criminal and even our civil divisions, like if we have a trial, it's a big deal. We often will send interns or junior AAGs who have not been practicing a long time. We did have a trial. We've had two maybe in the past year. I think at Domenica.
Just finished one.
We just finished one. So I would say that's normal, two or three.
It's definitely normal to not have, trials don't run all the time. And really, it's a breakdown of the system if we're at a trial because we're at an impasse and we haven't been able to do that. So that's the bit where that is. I know because it makes the paper and because it's saying that looks like that's the only work that prosecutors do. And it's really the tiniest part of what we do. Everyone needs the skill set in order to do that, for sure. But it also, in answer to your question about that, since I'm the head of the criminal division, I'm responsible for every single one of those cases. And every single one of those cases is something that we do as an MDT model. So an MDT model, think of the Attorney General's office as a specialized unit. And I think this might clear up maybe some of this confusion. The state's attorneys are responsible for 100% of the cases in their county. All of the law enforcement flows directly to the state's attorney's office. There's no natural flow to the Attorney General's office. The natural flow that we've created is ICAC, and that is ICAC had over 1,000 cyber attacks last year. So that feeds directly into our office. So that is the only law enforcement that really we have caseload that comes to us. Everything else, as designed by statute, is in the Attorney General's discretion, what she believes is best for the state, which is why she prioritizes what she does. It is not shocking to have 99% of the criminal cases done by 99% of the state's attorneys. That is normal. Our caseloads would never be their caseloads because it just can't. We are located in Montpelier. There are 14 different counties, which means we have to go to every single county, and we do. We have a felony caseload. The felony caseload means that we're doing depositions, that we're doing high-level cases. And they're cases that are really complex and have a lot of emotional impact. I mean, you're looking at child sexual abuse materials, and that's all you do. It's a lot.
It's heavy.
It's
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with murder victims, and you're dealing with family members, you're dealing with sexual assaults all across the state. It is really heavy work. When you're talking about line DSAs and those 300 counts that they're talking about, a lot of that count is misdemeanors. Those are not active working cases. Felony cases are different. And felony cases that we work on, which are the high-level sex assault cases and those kinds of cases, that is really, it's apples and oranges. They're not comparable in that way.
Okay.
So I hope that clears up a
It's
little
very-
bit about
yeah,
the flow
definitely.
of what it is and why we need to talk to the state's attorneys because there's no natural flow of other cases in that room. There is a standing order, there's a standing offer to all state's attorneys to deal with homicides. Some want our help and others don't. But we respect, as the Attorney General said, that discretion.
Thank you. And I appreciate you indulging the question because I am not an attorney by
Oh,
trade.
yeah.
And so I
Oh,
hope
no,
my
that's why I'm
questions
here.
aren't too basic.
And when Domenica was speaking, I realized I omitted a very, very, very important person who's in the criminal unit, and that is our victims advocate. She's amazing, and we actually get her assistance in other areas where we have, like, sometimes our civil rights unit will have someone who has been discriminated against, and her skill set will be helpful, even though they haven't been, it's not necessarily a crime that's been committed. So she's just like so amazing. We also sometimes will have a constituent who has an issue, and we think like, oh, Domenica, Armina will be able to help in this instance. Like, she's incredible. So I'm sorry, I omitted her, and she's actually really clutch. So I wanted to just take a minute to sing her praises.
That's all right. And I guess just one extra question too, Chair, if you'll indulge me. I think one of the things that is really welcome testimony and what Representative Dolan referenced is just the line of communication that you have between your office and the SAs. And I think that's really hard. And I think it's really great that there's a productive relationship there. This is kind of a two-part question, but one, the backlog is what the backlog is. I think there's going to be some back and forth on what the exact number is. But is there a strategic plan that you and your office have collaborated with the SAs on to address the backlog?
We have our own strategic plan. So
But it seems like it's impacting both parties, you know?
Yeah, I
It's
mean-
like now it's here and
we definitely are in communication with the judiciary about the backlog. And Domenica has, especially during the pandemic when the backlog was like very, very problematic. Domenica is in communication with them. I've also taken upon myself to like tour courthouses so that I can, so I've talked to folks who work in the courthouses about the backlog as well. And just, you know, a lot changed for, well, in every industry, but in our profession, but especially in criminal law, when, you know, remote sentencing, remote work generally really made it sort of, some of it was good, some of it wasn't. And now I think we're in the settling
Sure.
portion where everything's settling out and we're figuring what worked, what didn't, how did this function well, what tools are needed, and how can we address the backlog using those tools. So yeah, I mean, we're affected too. Like our cases are also in the backlog. So
do you
it's
think there's
frustrating.
something that we can do in statute to help you?
I would work with the judiciary,
Sure.
for sure. And you did provide a number of judges recently. I don't know when that was, but it was pretty recent.
I was not here for that, but
Okay.
I am aware of that.
Yeah, so then that's really helpful and great as well to have that. You know, the truth of the matter is our whole criminal justice system has been strained these past few years, and it's disheartening to see. But that's just, you know, the way it is. And unfortunately, more resources are not, it's not a surprise that more resources would be needed.
Thank you. Yield back.
So, Ken, did you have another question?
Yep.
Ken, then Angela, then now I'm gonna take the last question.
So just feeding back on what she was saying. It is emotionally draining on all of us about how bad the crimes are, the victims. It's just draining. I mean, when we're answering to our constituents, I mean, us as lawmakers, right? When bad stuff happens, I want to do a better job.
Mhm.
And I don't know how we go about doing that, but it's just gut
I
wrenching.
know.
And it works on all of us. It just does. And I know you probably can't give me an answer now, but I hope, I know we're working towards that. I just hope we can get there. That's not my question.
Can I just respond because you said what?
Absolutely.
Honestly, supporting not just state's attorneys, but local law enforcement and the state police is a way that you can support working those constituent concerns. You know, you can support moving ahead because they need our support. Even the state police has a lot of vacancies and they need new people, new recruits to come in. Same thing with local law enforcement, and every opportunity we have to support them and show our appreciation for them and the state's attorneys, I think we should take.
Oh, trust me, when it comes to law enforcement, I'm their guy.
Okay, good.
Going back to ICAC, and maybe you answered this and maybe you didn't, but it was actually Representative Burdick that even brought that up to me. I didn't know what it was.
Oh, yeah.
But my question is what's the caseload on that now? And how many lawyers do we actually have dedicated to ICAC?
We don't have lawyers dedicated to ICAC. It's the same lawyers. So those four lawyers we have now, we're filling some vacant positions. So it'll be 6 when we're fully staffed. They are the ones who handle the ICAC cases, and I should, these cases are cases that involve sexual assault of babies and toddlers. That's basically what those cases are. The literal most vulnerable people in Vermont. Those are the cases that are among our priorities, along with sexual assault and homicide. And I am never going to apologize for that.
No, again, going back to the emotional stuff that we're all going through.
It is very
sickening.
hard work. It is sickening. And that's one of the reasons why Domenica and I force ourselves to talk about it when we can, because there is a factor where I think people, it's so gross that people want to look away. They don't want to see it. And so we force ourselves to talk about it when we can, because it is critical work and it is hard work. And the investigators who have to do the work and the lawyers who have to do the work. And I'll be honest, even sometimes reviewing a press release and an affidavit is upsetting to the people who aren't even lawyers in our office. So it's hard work.
And I assume as life goes on, I assume it's getting worse. We're constantly, it's like the drug trade. It's like the drug trade is already out there, or the new drugs are already out there, and we're trying to play catch up to try to get ahead of them. And
I mean, when we started ICAC, whatever, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, we got a grant from the federal government, which we still get. And think about the way that that kind of visual material was passed from person to person. It wasn't there, the internet wasn't what it was.
right.
Things have changed dramatically, even social media type platforms being used. I mean, it is really hard work. And we're always having to kind of try to be one step ahead of the technology. And so there's a lot of training that also goes involved with that. And then when we have an actual victim here in Vermont, it's or anywhere, but I mean, it's a lot of the sexual abuse material that we see is material that happened, and we've seen it before. It's something that happened and we might even know, oh yes, this victim was found and this person was prosecuted. We have history, but when there's a victim in Vermont, and there often is, it's just really hard work.
So would you say we're maintaining, or we're not maintaining?
It's
But I thought
yeah.
it's,
drinking through a fire hose, as they say.
and there's no way with technology of anything that we can do.
No, I'll tell you an example. I don't want to get too far afield, but just one example that's been helpful is they have in recent years, they've been able to, there will be a video that we've seen before. And now there's an ability, and I'm probably explaining this wrong and Domenica's rolling her eyes, but there's an ability to, before we don't have that, there's like a way of marking that so that the investigator doesn't actually have to view it again, because it's very upsetting to watch this. So oh yeah, we know this one. It's whatever, what is it, like some sort of a code is put on it somehow. What is it?
The hash values as we.
It's a hash value. Yeah. So there's a way to protect the investigator who doesn't have to look at that one again, because it's already been identified as CSAM is the abbreviation. We would be happy sometime to come in and talk to you more about ICAC and the work that we do. And we can even bring one of two extremely adorable and very smart dogs.
Okay. It's good to have the dogs in.
Yeah.
Well, then Ian, then me.
Well, so I'm just reflecting on something you said, Domenica, and it feels, it's like, it feels a little incomplete to have this conversation in two parts and not have, like, we're talking about people who aren't in the room, and that doesn't feel great to me. And I understand that it's just a function of what we're doing. But I wouldn't feel right not saying something just in response to what you just shared about the apples and oranges comparison. And I'm not a state's attorney. I'm not in the attorney general's office, so I don't presume to, I fully believe that from where you sit, it's apples and oranges. I just want to make sure we're not inadvertently demeaning anyone's work by saying, oh, since you just have a bunch of misdemeanors, your job is not as hard as ours. And you weren't saying that, but it just struck me as a little like, ooh, that could be really hurtful. So I feel like since we aren't having a conversation with everyone in the room, I just want to speak to that. And I know that our state's attorneys are they're doing very hard work with few resources. It seems to be a theme in the state. A lot of people doing a lot of work with few resources. And I just want to make sure that everyone's work is being fully respected.
I think it was just the time that it takes to do a misdemeanor is just less.
Right.
And like depositions were mentioned, that's very time consuming.
Yeah.
The whole package. Sometimes we have complex defendants who have mental health challenges that makes the case complicated. So, but yeah, absolutely.
And they have all of that too.
They do. And then they have misdemeanors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And hundreds of them.
Yeah. Yep.
And their victims advocates have hundreds and hundreds of victims they're working with, and like numbers that you can't even really understand when you think about a person's, we all get the same 24 hours in a day. And so I just want to acknowledge that.
Ian.
I just wanted to thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, pleasure.
I just wanted to clarify the testimony just based on what we heard a little earlier. Is it a standing offer
Yes.
or is it a conversation with every time that there is a homicide or attempted homicide in Vermont? Is there a conversation with the SA and the county what happened about if the AG wants to step in or not?
It depends. If there's a standing order, not order, standing invitation, to reach out to the Attorney General's office in terms of, do you need assistance? Right? Sometimes there are really shocking crimes that happen that we'll do a reach out, say, like, hey, this is what's going on. But also, it depends on the kinds of investigations that are happening. Sometimes murders are really fast moving. And to get involved at that point in time would not be helpful in that space because a lot of things are happening very quickly. Other times something happens and it's a longer investigation. We're involved in 4 different homicide investigations right now that it's just, we have the person who was murdered. We just don't know who the suspect is yet. And those are much longer, much more intense, sometimes investigations, because you're talking about forensics, DNA, and other kinds of things that are happening. So I would definitely say that depends. But in terms of our help or what we can give, because again, we're 4 people right now. I mean, it is impossible to say that we could do a dent in any of the caseloads that what we're talking about here. So we kind of go into that space saying, if you need help, you know, we're here in those cases. If there's something really big that's happening that we think we can be of assistance. And I think most recently in the last couple of years, I think the cases that we have been of most assistance to are the cases that intersect homicides and mental health issues. Because we did take those cases, we did the cases for Chittenden, we were successfully prosecuted all of them. There are that level of expertise that we have developed in that area. And that's a number of our co-prosecution cases with state's attorneys right now have those elements in there. And I do want to, I would never want to belittle anyone's work. And that was absolutely not what I was doing. I maybe should have too much of a shorthand in terms of that. I was a line prosecutor for years and years and years and years. I've done that work. It is very important work. They are overwhelmed, and that is clear. And that's why we are allies in the resources that they need. My point was simply that when you look at our caseload and their caseload, which the testimony was when we weren't here in the room the other day, about 300 cases versus what they perceived our caseload count was. My point was just that our caseload in general is a different context caseload than what their line DSAs are doing. But they're doing amazing work. They're responsible for all of it. And they're doing what they can, and they do need help. So thank you for everything.
All right, so I guess my last question is, so when you get the 2 additional attorneys, what's your capacity going to be for taking on some more homicide cases?
Well, we always are eager to help with homicide cases. So, I mean, the legislature has already, structured our system around the Attorney General taking homicides if she wishes. And I have just deferred to the state's attorneys because that's my style. But yeah, we of course can handle more homicides and always offer.
So, the reason for the question is, if the state's attorneys are so overwhelmed with their cases, which they are, why not send more homicide cases to the Attorney General's office?
You'll have to ask them. Yeah, and
But I put that on the record just for handling the cases that there's special expertise in the Attorney General's office. And if that can free up resources, that should be thought of as one of the options or getting more help. So with that, I really appreciate your testimony today. Thank you. And so we will move on to actual money stuff underneath this. And we never had any figures mentioned, but that's fine. And really appreciate your time.
my pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. so we have a little less than a half hour, so, but we'll start with Jennifer Pullman. So thank you.
And,
Oh, no, no. Welcome to Power Our Books Anytime.
You lost it. Little challenge right now.
You, Miss Attorney General, when you walk out there, she's gonna hit you up for a raise.
grabbed my lunch.
Maybe she's holding that as hostage.
Thanks for being here. If you can both introduce yourselves for the record and then proceed.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Jennifer Pullman. I am the director with the Vermont Center for Financial Services.
Good morning. I'm Carol Broship, the Director of Finance and Administration for the Center for Financial Services.
Thank you for being here. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for your time this morning, and aware that our colleagues are also in the room to testify, so we will try and be mindful of our time. With respect to our conversation today, you heard from me a couple of weeks ago, mostly about victims' rights and some information that I find depressing to convey in terms of the work that you all have done to put rights in the books, but we don't really have remedies for victims. And I spoke about the funding challenges towards the end of that. So while I felt what I presented before was depressing, I'm not here to say today that it's going to be any less depressing. So, when I hear again about the backlog and the impact on the system, I just want to underscore before we get started that, again, there is that, not the three-legged stool, it's the four-legged chair, but the impacts on victims that take place due to the backlog, but also on the advocates when we have delays. I really want to underscore this piece. Not only will I speak to how complex and challenging these cases are becoming for advocates, but when you have a delay, it's the advocates in the programs that we fund, advocates in the network offices who are struggling to put something in place for victims in the meantime, whether it be looking at housing issues, mental health issues, safety planning, those pieces that while a victim survivor may be waiting for the criminal justice system to mete out some level of accountability, that's not taking place and it's taking longer. So I really want to underscore the stress on the advocates who are struggling to try and, accomplish this work when victims and survivors and cases are lingering and lingering and lingering. With respect to the center, I'll be very brief. Again, we are that weird state agency that nobody really talks about. We have 19 employees, 2 of whom are full-time. We administer 2 direct service programs. That's our victims compensation program and our restitution program. And we speak to that in our hot off the press handout. Those pieces are really essential for providing support for victims and survivors that are, in some ways, I think the most meaningful because there are crime-related losses. And that victim has to struggle to manage those while in trauma. So to the extent that the compensation program can provide that support immediately with just defining a probable cause, to the extent that the restitution process can provide a way to make victims whole, I think that those services, again, we hear time and time again from victims and survivors how meaningful those are to them, especially as they are awaiting resolution of their case. So I really want to underscore the programs that we have and what they're able to do for victims and survivors. And that's really important because that's going to get to what our ask is. I also want to underscore that the grants, and I've spoken about this before, a significant amount of our work is in the grants department, even though it's our department consists of one grants manager. No, we just hired somebody. So now we have 1.5. I'll consider her that person. And we have our financial manager who does everything under the sun for the center as well. And we have an assistant, but that's 260 individual subgrants that have to be reviewed and processed every quarter. And 60 different subgrantees that we work with. And when I say work with, it's not just, oh, here's your grant. We have responsibilities to all of you, responsibilities to the federal government. We get to go through an audit every few years, which is really wonderful. But we do the site visits. We do the technical assistance. We help programs get their budgets. We write the RFPs we write the grant solicitations. We report to the federal government, we report to all of you. So there's a lot involved. I wish it were just processing paperwork, but there's so much technical assistance and support that we provide, training and the like, that that's a very laborious job. So as you'll see, how does this get done? How does it get supported? How does it get funded? Generally, well, for the most part, even though we're a state agency, we receive just over $1.5 million general fund dollars to support this work. And the vast majority of that is a direct pass-through to fund programs such as the network, child advocacy centers, supervised visitation, some prosecutors as well. And that's a direct pass-through for which the administration of over $1.5 million, we receive no administrative support to do that work. We do have a small portion of general fund dollars that we use for our IT systems that we have to implement to be able to provide services. And we have one general fund position, but the vast majority of those are, again, straight pass-throughs to community organizations. And if you're interested in the organizations that we fund, on the back page of this handout, there's a map of Vermont, and you can see what's in your community that we fund. And then there's a list of the statewide programs as well. So as you can see from this pie chart, we have a very small amount that is, I wasn't going to try PowerPoint again, in case you're wondering. I tried last time.
You did a great job last time.
We're going to use visuals.
It's better for eyes and brains than you.
Okay, good.
Yes, yeah.
And mine too. We really rely, our victim services in our state rely heavily on federal funds and special funds. And this over-reliance is really problematic because it creates incredible challenges that are very different. Our agencies, the programs that we fund, that are very different from the state's agencies that come before you. They know what they had. They know what to expect. They have the 3%, they get pay act and cost of living increases for their positions. So they know going in, they know what they had, and they kind of know what they're going to get. Carol is amazing. She is able to build a budget each year based on projections and predictions. And I'm very proud to say on her behalf that while other states have had to make cuts and cuts and cuts, Carol's figured out a way to at least level fund programs. So we're keeping doors open, but that's another conversation for just a few minutes.
She's in charge of everything.
Somehow she does it. Don't take her away from the center.
We'll still do the good work for you.
So we are putting out, grants without actually knowing, because the federal fiscal year, we don't know what we're going to get from the federal government until September 30th, more or less. We know our state appropriation on July 1st. So it's this, and then our special funds depend, and they change every month, and we're going to talk about that. So we have people doing incredibly stressful jobs who literally don't know if they're going to have a job in a couple of months. We do the best we can, and she is a great predictor, but it's a really unstable environment for people to be working in, especially more so now than ever with the additional stresses, because we know what's happening in our communities. We know the stress, we know the increase in substance misuse, we know that human trafficking is a piece of, here in Vermont, and that's changing how victim services are being delivered, because there are elements of that in cases you wouldn't automatically think of. Retail theft, for example, a lot of that is underlying that are victims being pressured into that kind of activity, or drug trafficking. So the cases are so much more complex, and and they're operating in this world where they don't really know, and we don't really. And just to underscore that, as you all know, a couple of weeks ago, we had the executive order that froze federal funds. And you can imagine the panic that set in for programs that operate shelters. What does this mean? We had a program that provides services and support for victims of sexual assault, not a network program, but another program that said, we're going to have to close down the doors, because how could I operate when I don't know if I can pay my people to do this work? And they say that with broken hearts. When that was communicated, it was like, but I can't have people working for no money. So I really want to, I've been here year after year, it feels like, saying, this is really stressful. This is really uncertain. This is really volatile. But 2 weeks ago, it really just hit. Like, no, this is not an okay way to run a victim services programming. It's just not, it's not okay. With respect to the federal grants, and we list some of these out, but we are currently, we'll be losing. We received 3 ARPA grants that will be ending in September of this year. That is a loss of about $750,000. The biggest piece I want to focus on, though, is VOCA. VOCA is the Victims of Crime Act, and again, have a nice visual this is our most important grant. By most important, I say is that because it's our largest grant that the state receives for victim services funding. We fund 46 different programs with these dollars, and literally there are some programs, and Carol was looking at budgets where if VOCA were to go away or have a significant cut, they might have to literally close their doors because they're so dependent on Victims of Crime Act dollars. And what we're looking at right now is a 40% cut. Last year, we were receiving $3 million in VOCA funding. This year, we're looking at 1.9 million. So we have a loss of 1.1 million to these agencies, which is a loss for the programs. It's also a loss for the center because we rely on VOCA for administrative funding to keep our doors open as well. So the loss in VOCA funding is significant, concerning, and also VOCA, just like our own special funds, is dependent on fees and fines that get deposited to the fund from federal convictions. So when a big corporation does a really bad thing, like Enron, and there's a prosecution and there's a huge fine, then that is great for the fund. When cases like that are not prosecuted, or they're deferred, for example, or they're settled otherwise, that can be money that then the fund does not receive. 2018 was an all-time worst year for VOCA. So again, it's a very volatile funding source, and we continue to be worried about how prosecutions are going to impact that fund in a way that would hopefully grow it and not further deplete it. With respect to our special funds, which are that other nice chunk of the pie, we have 3 special funds that we administer: the Victims' Compensation Special Fund, the Restitution Special Fund, and the Domestic and Sexual Violence. And essentially, those funds are established or supported through a surcharge that you can find at 13 BSA 7282. I put that on the committee page as well as all the rest of the other documents. And that basically, again, provides funding by providing support, a certain amount of support for when there's a criminal fee or fine or civil violation. So it's that surcharge that comes from that to support those 3 funds. The Domestic and Sexual Violence Fund also receives a very small amount of funding from the marriage license fee, but that amounts to not even enough to support a position. But we're reliant on these funds, and these have been, again, another problem. The legislature, in its wisdom, identified before 2013 that this was not sustainable, and actually had one of those famous studies that was done and said, again, this is not sustainable. Back in 2013, there's a report, and we need to change this. And unfortunately, things did not change. And then in 2022, actually in 2021, the Joint Fiscal Office was asked to take a look at funding for victim services in Vermont. And a report was issued in 2022, which is on a committee page, that again said this is not sustainable. There were some recommendations made, two of which this body implemented. One was to change the surcharge to make a slight increase for the Domestic and Sexual Violence Fund, as well as the Compensation Special Fund, that they projected would net potentially $300,000 to $400,000 a year extra for those funds. Unfortunately, we're not even seeing half that now. Bless you. There was also the recommendation, again, that potentially the marriage license fee could be helpful. It doesn't, as I said, even fund a position. So we implemented those recommendations, and we're still back here to say we have a declining revenue source over the past 5 years. The compensation fund has seen a 50% decrease in its revenues. The restitution fund has seen a 33%, and the domestic violence and sexual violence fund is all over the place. And again, it's constantly up and down. I'm going to speak to some of those deficits, but we just keep declining, and you all have tried.
And there's a question.
I was gonna let this go. I can't let it go. You said something back in 2017 or something, it was 17, 18, something like that. It hit a low.
2018, yes.
2018. What hit a low?
The deposits into the deposits into the VOCA fund.
Okay.
So that received less money that year than any other year.
And we've been basically declining every year because for some reason, somehow or another, and I'm looking for an answer that I'm sure you probably can't give me, but I need help. As the years have gone on, it appears to me, no, I know, we have forgotten the victims in my mind. And I want to know how to fix that. Can you tell me how to fix that sitting there today?
Well, I've got a lot of thoughts about that. They're all over the place, but I'm here to say what we need absolutely to be able to keep doors open, to be able to make sure victims are being given compensation, restitution orders are being satisfied, and programming that's happening in your communities needs to happen. And I also want to underscore that what we're asking for is not, it'll keep those doors open, but we're talking about programs that have been level funded for almost 15 years. So we all know that's really a cut. They don't get cost of living automatically.
So basically, bottom line, in this state that I happen to be one of the representatives, we're really failing. We really are failing the victims of this state.
I believe that this body has done everything that has been suggested in terms of like the JFO report. I believe everybody thought this was going to come up with some solutions. You all acted on the changes that were sort of the top level changes. And I find it problematic to be relying on a surcharge to fund core services. And I really wonder whether, as a state, it's even appropriate for us to rely on folks who, we're talking about people who've committed crimes, who don't generally have a lot of money. We don't have Enrons in Vermont. We have people, who don't have a lot of money. And so we're using them to fund what I consider core services. And for me, just philosophically, the model's not working. And philosophically, I wonder whether that's really the appropriate way that we want to do this.
Could we consolidate more programs together to be more efficient?
I really believe that the community programs that exist all across the board, and again, you can see those on the map, really reflect what that community needs. And I think that they are responding as best as they can, again, reflecting what their community needs. So I like a community-grown model for my own purposes. And that's really where the center comes in though, because then we are the big bad state, I suppose. And we just look at, program implementation standards. Are people crossing their T's and dotting their I's as they're supposed to be in terms of grant reporting? So I think we can provide some of that consistency and also look to see, oh, there's a gap here, there's a gap there. One of the requirements of VOCA, ironically, is that we're supposed to fund new initiatives, which is funny because we have to fund new initiatives. And then in a couple of years, we're like, well, what do we do now? We have this program and we don't have any money to fund it. But that's one of our roles, is to say like, okay, we have programming here, but what about in this area? So I love the idea of communities deciding some of those pieces, but also having the center kind of looking at this whole picture and making recommendations for additional programming, let's say, or looking at how one county does something versus another. So I think it complements itself very well. That's a very long-winded answer to your question.
You good?
Oh, I guess it was very long-winded.
I appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, if I would very much appreciate if we had a budget that was larger. I look at the Department of Corrections, and obviously I'm not saying they shouldn't, but they have over 220 million general fund dollars. We have 1.5 million.
No, I'm just trying to be diplomatic here, just trying to stay out of trouble and just
I
let you
am
know.
as well, so.
Go ahead and ask for more money. Come on, Ken, go for it. You could do it. You
Yes,
can
we
do it.
did not receive.
Down. More money than the governor.
See where this just went?
You can do it, Ken. I know you can. Your heart's there.
I do have one constructible, I'm sorry.
Yes, no, go ahead. And well.
Not against my governor.
And then.
Oh, no, I have one constructive, I guess, suggestion, observation that maybe this committee might be interested in. Back in 2022, when the JFO report came out, we noticed something very interesting, that while all of the special funds that the center administers were in very dire straits and declining, the special fund that exists for the special investigation units was doing quite well and had, I believe, doubled. So I asked the courts at the time, how do you determine priority of payments? Who gets what and when? And at the time, they said it really just goes over to sort of the collections. I believe it was APRAs, and they collect the money and then it goes out. And Hawaii actually has a priority of payment statute and they designate that, restitution should be paid. They have a different restitution system, but then compensation and like way down is probation fees and fines for their person's own supervision. But they have something like that. And I can't help but wonder if there might be an improvement, let's say, for some of the three funds that are really struggling, if we were to elevate those funds in that list, because I can't for the life of me understand why one special fund is vastly outperforming when the others are.
So we're gonna have to break it down for a joint session, which they always ask us to be there. We all end up in the Senate. So Sarah, I hope you can come after the floor this afternoon. We have some space after the floor. It should be pretty short, I believe. So floor is at 3:00. We'll probably be at 3:30. Jen, if you are available to wrap up, and you can zoom in if you want. That's absolutely.
Because I have a sick child at
That's
home.
absolutely zoom in so we can finish up.
Okay, perfect. We're just about done though. So,
Yeah.
but
But I think, yeah, we can read that.
okay.